Thank you for plugging into this Family Life News podcast, streaming issues-driven, family-focused news.
This is Faith Under Fire. Each Thursday on Family Life, we give voice to religious battlegrounds in this nation. I'm your host, Tracy Lynn. With us today, Aaron Pierce with Steiger International. For whatever reason, many of us are simply intimidated by the idea of sharing Christ with our friends, yet we've clearly been called to share. What's the first step in facing our fears over evangelism?
Wow, great question. I think first and foremost, we need to draw closer to Jesus, because the closer we get to him, the more we see the beauty of who he is and what he's done for us. The more we fall in love with him, the more that we begin to see the world through his eyes. So evangelism can't be like a to-do list. It's got to be an overflow of the love that we have and that we receive from Jesus. And so I think it starts with the revelation of the beauty of who Jesus is and what he's done for us. And then I would say right alongside that, it's asking him to give us his heart for people, to break our heart for what breaks his. Because really, until our hearts are broken, we're not going to get uncomfortable or sacrifice or step outside of what we're normally doing to go after the lost. So,
yeah, thank you for that, Aaron. Again, another reminder of how he cares about our heart motive. Without preparing a sermon or a lecture, we each can be ready to share a nugget of truth, maybe about how the Lord has changed us. Do you have any tips for capturing meaningful bullet points to share with others in the future? Again, about how the Lord has worked in our life, or how he's changed us, or how we've just been so loved by him.
Yeah, there's so many places we can go with this. I think one of the unique challenges that we face in our country, in our culture, is that the dynamics have shifted. So we've gone from a nominal Christian nation in which most identified as Christian and had a positive view of the church and saw the Bible as a moral authority, to a post-Christian culture in which many people have walked away from the church, or now are apathetic, if not outright hostile to the church. So in some ways, it's more intimidating and less natural. And so the challenge is, how do we overcome that? And I think one of the best ways to do that is to actively and intentionally build relationships with people who would not normally walk into a church, to live like a missional life, whether it's those that are around you in your sphere of influence, or actively and purposely engaging with people who might not know or be interested in the church, and to build a friendship and to live a life that shows what it means to follow Jesus, because so many people have these negative views. And so in one sense, we can start with our life, and we can start with sharing our lives and caring for people. And then in doing so, we build the relationship and the credibility to begin to introduce Jesus. But I think a lot of us, this idea of people who are uninterested or far from God has become a very personal issue. And it starts by actively building relationships with those who might never walk into a church.
Yeah. Aaron, friendship or relational evangelism tends to be more effective than simply handing out a pamphlet to someone. Would you paint a picture for us of what that involves or looks like? Now, you already alluded to it, but maybe another step that we can do.
Absolutely. The challenge is we want to take these relational friendships that we've developed and begin to introduce spiritual conversations. And I say spiritual intentionally because that is often a step in the direction of a gospel conversation. And the truth of the gospel, if I consider a classic model of the 4 spiritual laws, there's a truth there, but it's based on assumptions about morality and truth and the authority of the Bible and the nature and existence of God. It's based on assumptions that maybe a secular person doesn't hold to be true. And so what we often need to do is start with spiritual conversations, because spirituality is something that many people are open to. And the reality is that almost everything is spiritual when you begin to think about it. Things like when people are passionate about fighting injustice, that's based on a moral framework. Or when people care about the oppressed and the marginalized, that's based on human value and dignity. And so there are many things in our conversations where we can begin to introduce spiritual conversations that set the groundwork for introducing the cross. So my encouragement is taking everyday conversation and finding the spiritual truth that is in it.
I'm just thinking, like saying to someone, how has your concept of truth been developed?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And we developed a tool called Spiritual Conversations for the Non-Religious. And part of it is to help create these natural pathways for exactly that kind of conversation. And we do live in the day of kind of moral relativism in which we all have our own truths. But then the reality is that doesn't work, right? Like if you talk to your average secular university student, you ask them, where does morality come from? Who's right and wrong? How do we decide? They're going to tell you in the end, inevitably, that it's maybe a social construct. But then if you ask them what makes them angry, they'll speak passionately about injustice, right? Fighting against, and those two things don't really connect. So it's about lovingly and gently challenging the incoherence that may exist. But then, of course, recognizing that a persuasive argument is never enough, that we need the power of the Holy Spirit to convict and to soften hearts. And so that's why that prayer side is so critical to all of it. But I think part of it is learning how to challenge the worldview in a loving, gentle way so that the message of the cross can be shown.
Oh, excellent stuff. Aaron, what else would you like to let us know when it comes to reaching others for Christ or the Go movement?
Yeah, so the Go movement is this global collaborative movement of churches and ministries that are coming together about reaching people that would not walk into a church. My organization, Steiger International, is part of it, and we love serving together, and it's all about resourcing and catalyzing people to reach people in your sphere of influence. So you can get resources by going to the website. It's gomvmnt.us. And there are resources. You can also get resources directly from our mission, steiger.org, steiger.org. We have resources, like I mentioned. Spiritual Conversations for the Non-Religious is a tool that we have. We also have a training program called Jesus in the Secular World, all free and available for anyone that has a desire to reach people that may not walk into a church.
That's Steiger International's Aaron Pierce. I'm Tracy Lynn, Family Life News.